Okay, I'd like to call tonight's regular meeting of council to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of March 7th, 2016 be adopted as presented with the additional of late agenda items 9B, Canada School Property, item 7C, letter from Judy Riddell dated March 2nd, 2016 regarding letter of support for the BC Hospice Palliative Association seed grant. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Renhawa. Any discussion? All's in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 22nd, 2016 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Moreau. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 22nd, 2016 be received. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And item 3A, or C, recommendation that the minutes of the public hearing meeting of February 22nd, 2016 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Moreau. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up, report 6A from the City Planner regarding development permit application for the Prince Rupert Rowing and Yacht Club. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We received this application on February 16th. It is to rebuild the I have to open up it is to rebuild the existing yacht rowing and yacht club, and the renderings are included in your report. They're the same as I'm showing you in the overhead. The use is permitted in Cow Bay zoning, C5. It also has design guidelines that it requires to fulfill. With respect to design guidelines, in terms of form and character, it definitely reflects the marine character of the area. It is of small scale in building and form, and it also for material uses horizontal cladding. Referral comments from the City Engineering Department respond to the applicant's question in the application with respect to are there any other permits that will be required. There are 3 points made. First point is review the possible relocation of city storm outfall with City Engineering Department. That is for the applicant to conduct prior to construction. To also review the proposed bulk fill into the marine environment with the following jurisdictions: Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Ministry of Environment. In other words, that's not in our jurisdiction. And the site development requirements for relocation of additional utilities are at the owner's expense. The above noted responsibilities will be highlighted in a development permit. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, the proposed project complies with the Cow Bay design guidelines.
Any questions from council? So the recommendation is that council issue development permit number 1604 for the Prince Rupert Rowing and Yacht Club. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Renhawa. And I'll just say that I think the design looks absolutely amazing. I'm definitely happy to see that type of development happen in the community. Any further comments?
Question.
Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, moving on to item 6B, report from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the Ridley Island tax sharing agreement.
Thank you. At the February 22nd, 2016 council meeting, council requested a report from staff on the Ridley Island tax sharing agreement between the City of Prince Rupert and the District of Port Ed. In 1980, when the city of Prince Rupert underwent a boundary extension that included Ridley Island, the Lieutenant Governor approved the boundary with the provision that the tax revenue from Ridley Island be shared with the District of Port Edward. The sharing was that both municipalities would share the first $25,000 equally, and then the balance would be shared 80% to Prince Rupert and 20% to Port Edward. This sharing agreement was to be reviewed by both municipalities after the first 3 years and then every 5 years thereafter. In 1984, the sharing percentage was changed to 83% to Prince Rupert and 17% to Port Edward. The 3% change was considered a contribution by Port Edward towards the Civic Centre operations. This amendment was approved by the Minister of Municipal Affairs the same year. Since then, the city has sent letters when the period for review is to occur, and each time the district has sent back a letter indicating they do not wish to reopen the discussion. Over the past 6 years, the payments made to the District of Port Edward have amounted to over 50% of the total taxes collected by Port Edward. Last year, the city paid the district over $700,000, and the city has budgeted approximately the same amount for 2016. And that concludes my report.
Any questions or comments from council? Councilor Morrow?
Thanks very much for your report. I do just have a quick question because it is a bit before our time. But was there any discussion with the prior council about a tax sharing arrangement with Pacific Northwest LNG, the project on Lelu Island?
The city of Prince Rupert was not invited to participate in the reciprocal arrangement, which would include Lelu Island.
I think we all understand why Port Ed feels the way that they feel. They don't want to reopen this. And I'm all for being a good neighbor, but when we're talking about this arrangement being over 50% of their tax revenue, I definitely think it warrants further discussion. But I do want to respect Mayor Dave McDonald's request to be at the table. So rather than us trying to beat the subject to death, I'd really rather just request that we invite the Port Ed Council to meet with us, council to council, and we can discuss. Really, the agreement to me seems to be outdated. It's not serving the city of Prince Rupert's interests. And I really do think it warrants further discussion.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to formally request a council-to-council meeting with the District of Port Ed to discuss modifying the existing Ridley Island tax sharing agreement.
Okay, move seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Yeah.
If we reopen this, then I think we should be sitting down with them and discussing a tax sharing situation on Lelu if it goes ahead also. At that same meeting, I'd like that to be put in there as an amendment, if Blair so agrees.
I'm not sure if that needs to be a part of the motion. It could just be a topic of discussion, though, for sure. I think I just, Ms. Bombin, so in terms, so they give us, originally it was 20%, then they gave us 3% back for the Civic Center. But yeah, the 17% still equates to 700,000. So in terms of what about like the airport, ferry, capital costs, operational, so no contributions there, and the landfill as well?
Residents of Port Edward pay the airport ferry fee on a user fee basis. Same with landfill, they pay on a user fee basis as well.
So when we raised the fees by 45% last year, does that even bring them to equal what Rupert residents pay in terms of what they pay for fees for landfill? Is that?
The reason that the increase occurred was because we had used some of our gas tax to expand our landfill to accommodate much of the I'll call it the gold rush effect that had actually occurred in Prince Rupert, with many developers coming to Prince Rupert and participating in renovating a lot of homes, and that was all of a sudden taking up quite a bit of landfill space, airspace out at our landfill, and we felt that because the city gas tax had to be used, which is City of Prince Rupert people, we felt that the rates should be reflective increased basically to recoup some of the gas tax grants that we had lost to accommodate the gold rush effect, which has been precipitated by the Laylu Island project.
So okay. So if we have a fire out in Port Ed, have we been sending our fire trucks out there as well?
Yes, we have a mutual aid agreement.
So essentially, what I'm getting at here is that it seems to be a very one-sided arrangement, that we are transferring quite a lot of revenue over, yet in terms of the shared services back, that doesn't seem to be necessarily the case. So I think that needs to be part of this discussion as well, that it's time now for us to look at the fact that, when this deal was negotiated, we had a mill that was supporting this community. We had a Ridley Island that was just about to be developed. And now we don't have a mill, which costed the city $90,000 a month for how long? Long time. And we don't have these extra developments at the moment. Yet, one opportunity comes on Port Ed's doorstep, PNW, and that is not a reciprocal arrangement back in terms of us receiving some sort of benefit from those developments. So I think we really need to, as Councillor Moreau was suggesting, have a frank discussion that, it's 2016 now, the world has changed, the time has changed, and it's time for us to really address the fact that we're not in a financial position anymore to be transferring that type of revenue over to Port Edward. And the taxpayers pay some of the highest taxes per capita in all BC, and yet Port Ed residents pay some of the lowest taxes per capita in all of BC, and it's just not fair to the Rupert taxpayers. And I think that's why I'm very supportive of this motion, that we have to have this discussion now. Any further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To reopen this agreement, both councils can agree, or provincial government or federal government, who can change this? How it can change?
Both municipalities every 4 years are supposed to be reviewing the agreement anyway. Any changes, like in 1984, they are agreed between the two municipalities, and then it's sent to the province for amendments to the letters patent.
Further?
I think just following up Council Randhawa's question, if both councils disagree, is there an arbitration at the provincial government level? So they have to agree with, we have to talk them into agreeing with us, because there is no agreement, because what Port Ed writes in theirs, that's what I was sort of wondering. Port Ed writes in theirs that we lobbied the province for a share of the tax base, and we are successful by being awarded 20% of the taxes. So that was on new development. That was on really new development. So I was just wondering if there was any if we can go to the province if Port Ed refuses, because I can imagine that I was interested in the reply to our landfill, because it was certainly a dust up with Port Edward when they were mad about our landfill, and they commented on when we wanted to try to increase the city's boundaries to include lot 444 and across the harbor. They commented that we are having a land grab, even though their land goes down to Tyee. So for 500 people, they got way more land than we have. So it seems to be every time that we try to do something, we get negative comments on it by Port Ed. And we need to be able to sit down and try to discuss with them. But if we can't talk them into it, I was just wondering if there's anywhere we can go for a recourse.
There's no dispute resolution included in the letters patent when they instituted this agreement.
However, I do believe that the province ultimately does hold the power in terms of the agreement. Is that correct? Like they could, okay, so they have the power to make the changes.
Wasn't part of that land on the way out to Tyee part of that deal, where they got some tax sharing plus the land?
I'm not sure. Councillor Nish?
I just want to make a statement basically to simplify this, like I said it to the minister one day when he was in here talking to us, and I said, how does it work that if you were in the big city and you had a neighborhood that was 10 minutes away from you, that neighborhood would contribute to all the everything that a taxpayer is required to pay, whether that be for the civic center, library, this, that, and everything. Basically, this is a neighborhood that's 10 minutes away that basically doesn't have to contribute to any of the things that a municipality needs. So they don't need to build a gym or a civic center or an arena or any of the stuff because they've already got ours to use for essentially free, other than what they pay. Same thing with the garbage dump, as you say, the ferry to the airport. All these things are the only fees they're paying, for the most part, are what they pay as a user pay. So if someone drove from Terrace and they wanted to use our airport, they would pay that same price. So I feel that this agreement is very outdated and definitely needs to be talked about. They can brag about having the lowest taxes in the province because we give them over half of their taxes. So it's pretty easy to keep it that way. Well, I can understand why they wouldn't want to discuss it, but it is time to discuss this, and the people of Prince Rupert need to know that this is happening so that they can understand why we're paying them $700,000 a year.
Further discussion? Councilor Morrow?
I just want to add one thing, and that's that ultimately it's in all of our best interest to work together and to be good neighbors. We know that, and I think it's a measure of good faith that Mayor McDonald asked to be included in all these discussions. So that's why I made the motion the way I did. I think this discussions would be much more fruitful with them across the table.
Absolutely. Okay, any last comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Also get a quick motion to receive the report from Ms. Baumann. Moved by Councillor Morrow, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, we have 3 letters for correspondence. First, 7A is a letter from the Museum in Northern BC regarding a letter of support for the security upgrade and installation project 2016. Moved by Councillor Minhawa, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. 7B, a letter from Mr. Brent Ross, dated February 23rd, 2016, letter of support to host the 2017 Junior All-Native Basketball Tournament. Moved by Councillor Minhawa, seconded by Councillor Niche. I wasn't sure with the letter, though, on whether what they were asking for exactly. Are they wanting us to just have a support letter in terms of just getting them to have the bid to be here, or do they want the Civic Center to host that? That's what I wasn't sure in the letter.
According to this letter, they want to host it in Prince Rupert because the village isn't capable of handling that many teams and fans, but we were hoping to get a supporting letter to take to Williams Lake as we put in a bid. So they're looking
So
for
just
the
to
city.
host it here then?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
I move that we send a letter, issue a letter of support for Lac Lams, hosting the 2017 Junior All Native Tournament. But I would, and part of the motion is that we send a cover letter saying that the issue of funding for that, or the issue of using the facilities and rates on the facilities has to be dealt with separately, so that Lac Lams can't think just because we're supporting it that means that we're going to be having any kind of deal on the facilities. That's my concern when I read this was it's just a letter of support, or does it mean it's a letter of support plus a cut on the facilities because we're supporting them? So I just think that we need to make it clear that we can certainly sit down and talk with them, but we don't want to have it thought of just because we're supporting it that there is a deal in the offing.
Yeah, I believe we have the motion on the floor. Is that correct, Mr. Manager? Yes. Yeah, so we have that motion, and if the mover and the seconder are okay with adding an amendment, friendly amendment to add that additional item, Does that work for you and Councillor Niche? Okay. So we'll add that as part of the motion. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And lastly, a letter from Judy Riddell, dated March 2nd, 2016, regarding a letter of support for the BC Hospice Palliative Association seed grant. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, moving on to 9A, bylaws. Report from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the Cow Bay Marina Fees and Regulations bylaw number 3386, 2016. Welcome.
I moved over here because our economic development officer, he was a part of the whole process. So in case there's any questions that I can't answer, he's available. So the Cow Bay Marina was built to serve two purposes. It was to provide additional itinerant vessels moorage in the summer season. Research at the time the project was proposed suggested that there are a significant number of vessels bypassing Prince Rupert yearly due to limited moorage capacity. By providing additional berthage, it is expected that these vessels will have the opportunity to restock provisions and hopefully dine, shop, and visit Prince Rupert, which will impart some economic benefits for our local businesses. The second purpose was to reclaim some of the public waterfront access that has been lost to industry. The marina has a public breakwater which is already open to the community. The marina itself will offer full service, which includes electrical and water hookup, Wi-Fi, laundry, and washroom facilities. It will also have a secure entry point and a marina manager living on site. Additionally, reservations can be made online for temporary moorage. The city is authorized under the community charter to impose fees and charges. In order to begin receiving fees for moorage, the council must adopt a bylaw detailing this service and include a fee structure. It is intended that the majority of the marina will be for temporary moorage for those travelers boating along the coast. However, there is a component that will permit annual moorage and off-season long-term moorage. It is these long-term moorage contracts which will cover the annual costs of the facility, while the revenues from the temporary itinerant vessels will be contributing to the asset renewal and be a diversified revenue source for the city. Staff researched 20 other marinas along the coast, and the rates proposed are in line with those marinas. Additionally, the Cow Bay Marina was advertised at the boat show in Seattle, and the feedback amongst boaters was that our proposed rates were comparable and not outside market. Council is in receipt of the proposed bylaw, and we are recommending first, second, and third reading.
Thank you. Any questions from Council? Councillor Cunningham.
One, when we first discussed this marina, there was a thought process of, on the community dock, having fishing vessels come in and be able to sell their wares and that. And then I noticed in Article 25 that there's no advertising or soliciting permitted. So is that still an option, or is that something that's just not being considered any longer? Because there was talk of making that part of the Cow Bay experience.
What was the... Councillor Cunningham? Sorry,
Well, there was talk originally of people being like a prawn boat or a halibut boat or a tuna boat coming in and being able to sell their wares on the community dock part of it. Because you've got the two docks. You've got the community dock that's going to give access to the people to the waterfront, as you say, so they can walk out there and that. But there was talk initially of something like that happening. I just wondered if it's no longer on the table.
No, I don't think it is longer on the table. The community breakwater wharf is intended to be used for just some access to the water, fishing off of the wharf. We plan on having some of the bigger yachts tie up there in that area as a source of revenue as well. So we don't plan on. I wasn't aware of that. What you're talking about there. Sorry.
other questions, Councillor Morrow?
I understand from the business plan the marina's predominantly meant for transient vessels, just short-term stay. But I did notice there is a small section related to annual mooring, so I'm wondering if you could just provide a bit of clarification on what sort of circumstances that an annual moorage agreement would be worked out.
Are you like referring to the rates you mean for the annual moorage? So we have, we're going to put aside 15 slips to start off with for annual moorage at $9.50 per foot per month. That tends to be the going rate along the 25 marinas that we looked at. And then there's also a winter, so if you want to moor your vessel there from October to March for $8.50 per foot, and then through the summer, $10.50 per foot per month. So that's the breakdown for we offer and no greater than 365 days, so that any end calendar year, and that's at $9.50 per foot per month.
Other questions from council?
Do you have in here a limit on the number of vessels that are going to be able to dock on a year-round basis? Because this was when the first plan first came out, was for itinerant vessels, and so I was wondering, is there a limit? They're quite long, and I have to admit that I read them quickly. And I see that you want to use the annual moorings to pay for the dock, and then the itinerant passings to pay for the profits on the dock. So I was wondering if I would have, maybe the yacht club doesn't have any problem, but I would have a problem if we were now running a public yacht club where people are going to be tying up permanently when we're looking at an itinerant. That was the reason for the initial reason for the plan. So I was just wondering how you are looking at working this.
The idea is that only 15 of them will be full-time moorage, or long-term moorage, basically, in the summer months. And then for the winter months, hopefully we could fill it up with long-term moorage when there is no itinerant vessels. So that would be for the winter months are considered October 1st through March 31st, and the summer months are considered April 1st to September the 31st. And those summer months would only have 15 slips, would be long-term. It also, the number of vessels that can actually get in the marina also is dependent on the size of the vessels that actually come in as well.
Any follow-up there, Councillor Thorkelson?
No, I think that was satisfactory. I just didn't notice in there that there was a 15 cap on year-round morages. But I do have some questions of my own on some other topics in this bylaw. So there was, I was wondering what we were doing about sewage services. I see that in here that it says on page 36 that any vessel occupied on an overnight basis must be capable of movement under its own power, must have holding tanks and seals placed on all toilets. It's on page 36 and it's number 23C. And so I was wondering, what are we doing to supply, especially for vessels that are going to be there on a longer basis, what are we doing to supply holding tanks for a vessel who wants to be there for 2 weeks? What are we doing?
Okay, so the temporary stay aboards would have to keep everything on their own holding tanks, It's for a maximum of 14 days in any calendar month, and so that we were told by our marina manager that is acceptable, that they can be a stay aboard for up to 2 weeks, as opposed to a live aboard, which would be there year round, and we're not allowing live aboards at our marina because of the pollution.
Right, so we don't have a length restriction, and so I was wondering, are we going to be pumping holding tanks? That's what I was wondering, because there's supposed to be sewage treatment for vessels, and that's what I'm wondering.
We will not be pumping tanks.
So by that, maybe we should make sure that we're compliant with the pollution regulations or the sewage regulations, because my understanding is that we are supposed to provide some kind of service if we had a marina, and I don't know for sure, but I know that there were green regulations that took place within the department. Maybe Councillor Cunningham knows better than I.
They brought out a regulation, Transport Canada, I believe it was last year, but I don't know if marinas are required to have pump-out tanks. But I know that, even though we put our raw sewage right into the harbor, you have to now pump your sewage, your holding tanks out into the city's system, and then it gets pumped into the harbor. It's sort of a funny law, but it's a law that came in, I believe, last year with Transport Canada about holding tanks and sewage in it.
So we don't want to be non-compliant. And I was wondering if on page 40, and again I defer to Councillor Cunningham's maybe expertise in this subject, but I was wondering if we should have a fine for pollution. And that's page 40. It's you have pumping rates, electrical rates, and I don't know if this is the proper place for it, but it's I was looking at some kind of a fine for pollution. I can see that any damage done later on, and it's under the environmental section, says any damage done shall have to be paid for by the proponent, or by the proponent, by the too much LNG, by the vessel. But I was looking at things like bilge pumping. If our shoreline is foul, do we want to go through litigation, or do we just want to have a fine? If a vessel sinks and has to be pumped, and we have pollution, what do we want to do with that? And the other thing is just the accumulation of garbage. If people throw their garbage overboard, are they going to be subject to the city's garbage bylaws?
As far as the garbage, that's a very good question. As far as the other question that you had, we do have in Article 24 under page 36, there's any person who violates any provisions of this bylaw or the mooring rules, or who permits or allows any act or thing to be done in violation, is guilty of an offence and subject to a fine.
Councillor Cunningham?
Okay, in Canada, polluter pays. That's the law. Transport Canada has the capability to fine anyone polluting. I went through this, and one of the things that you have, and I believe the Yacht Club has it too, is they have to have a valid insurance before they tie it up or while they're tied up, which covers just about all aspects, whether it's environmental damage, pollution, sinking, salvage and everything else. So when I read the fact that you are requiring insurance and proof of insurance, then I wasn't too concerned about that. But when it comes to bilge pumping and that, it's one of those things that is looked after on a day-to-day basis by usually the Coast Guard or Transport Canada. And we have the spy plane that flies over, the big red 951 that identifies 0.01 of a liter in the water.
Councillor Thorkelson?
So so I've got a boat down there, and my boat, I pump the bilge. So what happens? What's the community recourse? So I'm just wondering about making sure that we don't have a film of gas or film of oil, running down Cow Bay, sitting in front, smelling in front of the restaurants and further down. So I just wondering what would happen.
Generally speaking, your high-end yachts don't have problems with their bilges and that. What we do find on the north coast is certain commercial vessels that are tied up for long periods of time and unattended, will have bilge problems, and usually it's a small amount that goes into the bilge that it's non-recoverable and dissipates with the wave and wind action and that. If it's recoverable, then either small craft harbors, who are there usually all day, or our harbor, whoever our harbor master or harbor wharfinger is going to be, will be there on a day-to-day basis and would notice anything like that. You can put containment boom, absorbent boom, absorbent pads in the water, whatever it takes to pick it up. But generally speaking, on a small bilge discharge, it's non-recoverable, very, very light sheen, and you see it in the harbor quite a bit. We go out, try and clean it up, and can't clean it up because it's just not cleanable. It's so thin and that, yourself, a thimbleful of gasoline or diesel put on the water can spread and look quite bad, but it's actually not that bad. But generally speaking, if there's a fuel leak where a fuel line or something goes and it's a major problem, then there's reaction to it pretty quick with either small craft harbors, or I'm assuming we're going to have a small response kit down there, or we should have, and then it'll be on the dock with some absorbent boom and stuff like that. You would encircle the boat immediately and contain it, and then fix the problem with the boat, and the owner pays. And if we have conditions for fines and that, then there might be a fine too. Whether they're enforceable or not, I don't know, but it would be a city bylaw.
Other questions? Okay. So seeing there are no other questions here, recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the Calgary Marina Fees and Regulation Bylaw number 3386, 2016. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Randhawa. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, moving on to item 9B, report from the city planner. To lift the table motion relating to the application to amend the current zoning bylaw for the property located at 1500 Ottawa Avenue from P1 to multiple family residential RM3 Canada School. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application was before council on December 7, 2015 regular council meeting for second reading and public hearing, but it was tabled at that time in order for the applicant to meet with the council and to address density, possible phasing, managing of phasing, lowering density from RM3, and buffer issues. Council met with the applicant on December 14, 2015, and city staff followed up with a letter which is included in your agenda as attachment number 1 on January 20th. In that letter, council asked for density reduction to R1 and R2, which are single and two family residential zones, and RM1, multiple family residential zone, and to provide a public road through the property. If this will work, I have some calculations for you that will show you what this first letter indicates. So this is the property as it exists now. The property in question is the one between the two bold black lines, and it consists of 31,799 square meters. The request for the public road would look something like this. City agreed to exchange this right-of-way here to create this public road. For the purposes of calculations and conceptual only, I have divided the property in two equal halves. The upper half, which consists of 15,900 square meters, would go something along the lines of that R1 and R2. Minimum lot size is 230 square meters per lot. The gross yield would be therefore 69 lots. If we assume 25% to roads and green space, the net yield would be 50 to 52 lots. RM1 would look along the lines of 41 units per hectare. So considering the area, the gross yield will be 70 units. If we assume 20% to roads and green space, net yield would be in the range of 56 lots. This would be for a conventional subdivision. If this was to be a strata subdivision, the number could be pushed higher towards 70 units per hectare. The applicant responded by agreeing to include the road and to build it to city standards. And again, using the same conceptual logic of two equal halves, the same calculation for RM1 as above stands. It would yield in a range of 56 units. And RM3 changes from unit per unit density to floor area ratio. So therefore, the total floor area would be equal to 15,900 times 1.25, which is equal to 19,875 square meters. If we assume 30% of the gross floor area would go towards hallways, common areas, mechanical rooms or rooms, the net usable area would be 13,900 square meters. If we further assume 100 square meters per unit, that would be equal to 1,076 square feet per unit, generally on the upper end of a average two-bedroom unit, that would produce 139 units. Reducing the square foot area per unit would then further increase the number of units. So in a summary, city request was for density that would be in a range of about 110 lots. The applicant responded with a request for a density that would be in a range of 195 lots, of course, considering the last comment about sizing the rooms. And to remind you of the original proposal, which is really difficult to read there, I believe the total number of units were there 272. In conclusion, the applicant provided a proposal which surpasses the density council asked. However, city staff is of the opinion that the offer should be evaluated and the following options remain: to reject the application or to lift the resolution off the table and proceed to second reading and public hearing. Now, as a note of interest or clarification, should the council decide to lift the resolution off the table and proceed with anything that's different than the original bylaw, which was written at RM3, the bylaw would have to be amended and brought to you at the following meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Cunningham. Microphone, sorry.
Sorry. The way you've got the road now, where's that coming out at?
You mean here?
Yeah.
Well, this is coming on Prince Rupert
Your microphone, sorry, Mr. Cricket. Yeah, it's okay.
At this end, the road is coming at Prince Rupert Boulevard. At this end, as I say, it's a conceptual presentation. City did have a proposal for development of this area here, and in a sort of preliminary to detailed designs, there were options that were left should in the future this be developed as a residential area to queue it in. So in other words, this intersection would have to be thought about prior to having it completed.
So right now that road is just coming out at one end. It's going to be a dead end on the left-hand or north side. Is that correct?
As I did say, this is a conceptual presentation, and it would be a dead end until the other part of the property is developed.
So the other property then, the intention would be to have the road that would go through right up to the top of Silverside, correct? And
Right.
connect that neighborhood?
Right, and then also provision for this from here to be connected to the highway, utilizing
So
the
two routes?
Yeah.
Other than Digby Towers, which is empty, is there another place that in Prince Rupert that has that kind of density? What will what would the density be as compared to places like such as the townhouses on Seville Road or the McKay Street area?
About the only comparison in terms of the number of units would be the Macola properties, which are 142 units. It's about the highest number of units per development, and that one is actually at RM2, I believe. It's kind of difficult to compare relative densities to absolute densities. We do have Digby Apartments that are RM4 and the Sherbrooke development that's RM3. Without the map in front of me, I couldn't tell you any better than that, Councillor Torgerson.
So if we were looking at what the bylaw sitting in front of us is to amend the from P1 to RM3, and RM3 allows apartment buildings, correct? Right. And so it would allow tall apartment buildings, not just 4-story walk-ups, but something larger. And I realize that we could control that through the development permit.
RM3, the maximum height is 4 stories. That's the difference between RM4 that you have in Digby Apartments and this unit. So it'd be maximum of 4 stories high in RM3.
And each 4-story building would have how many units?
That would really depend on how the developer designs the project. As I said, these numbers are reflecting a sort of floor area ratio. This is a good example of how many units would be required to house 270 units. And these units are at 4-story high, 3 stories high. So if you were to add a 4th story, you may reduce, one block to a half, perhaps.
Councillor Cunningham.
So what you're saying with RM3 is your figure of 139 apartments is based on a 3-story or a 4-story?
This number does not contemplate how many stories, it just contemplates how many units. The envelope within which the applicant can build is a 4-story building. How many would kind of depend on what kind of a design that they utilize and how they distribute their parking places and their green areas. In other words, this configuration can be changed by increasing the floor, increasing it to 4 stories.
Councillor Reinhauer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Harbour View Apartments by Solis, those are RM3 or RM4?
I think it's RM. Harbour View, property.
I think it's RM2, isn't it?
I think it's RM2.
The ones by Seal Cove? Yeah, I believe those are RM2. And Oasis is RM3, correct?
Right.
Right. And that's 88 units.
Yes.
How many, just a quick question. So in the original design, you said it's about 272 units. One of the issues with that was that there was no through road, right? Municipal through road. And so now that the developer is willing to make those changes, which is great because that does fit with the what I think we're trying to get to is what a natural fit for the neighborhood will be as well. I think one of the issues is about, because one of the 10 principles of smart growth is densifying. However, where you densify, I think, is a big question. So with the original proposal, how many people could that potentially have fit with the 272 units?
The applicant has proposed that these will be family dwellings, family units. So if you have 270 family units at an average 2.6 people per household, that would be approximately 650 individuals that will be living there.
Right. And then with their amendment, how many roughly people would be there then?
So 200, so at 195, so I'll just round it to 200 for sake of numbers. Again, at 2.6 persons per household, that would be 520. Right? 260 times 2.
And then
So
our
more. So 2.6 times 200 would be 520.
okay. And then with the recommendation from staff, so you're saying 52 lots R2. So if each one had a basement suite, for example, or R1, R2.
Yep.
And so how many units or how many potential people, let's just imagine that it was R2, everyone had a basement suite.
So we are looking at what the council has asked for.
Right.
This numbers here. So if again, I'll round it off to 100 units. Of 100 units on RM1 would be single family dwellings. So that's 2.50 times 2.6, 100 and. Didn't bring a calculator. Have a calculator? You can press in those numbers for me, please. 56 times 2.6. Don't worry about it. Go away. 145. And then if we assume that each one of the single-family dwellings will have a suite, that would be 100 times 2.6. That's an easy one. 260. What was the previous number? 145. So
between 145 and 260?
yeah.
So on 3 options, we have 260 people potentially, or 145 to 260. One's 520 and one's 650 people, potentially.
Yeah. So that really depends on family compositions and how many of the units. And so the calculation in between essentially would be essentially between those two numbers. And it depends if they were all single family, if they were all workers, for example. Those will be single units, so they will be just times 1, and then average number of 2.6 is a British Columbian average. We're not exactly sure what our average is here.
So what's near this site location, amenities wise, parks wise? Because if we're having a bunch of families there, what would be the closest opportunity, I guess, for them to have recreation or some sort of... Because I know this is right against Quick Load's property.
Yeah. I imagine if you were to walk to the recreation center, that would be probably 20 to 25 minute walk to the recreation center. It would be probably about 10-minute walk to the school.
I guess Comrade School would probably be the closest.
Comrade School would be probably the other route, about 15-minute walk. We don't have any taught playgrounds in that neighborhood at all.
Right. Okay, those are just some of the... I wanted to just make sure that I could see visually how many people with each option. Councillor Niche.
Just when you were doing those calculations there, the last one that you were talking about with the R1, R2, that's just on one half of the property, right? So it'd be 260. If you technically had R2, say, you would have 100, that's 50 units at and then say if they were all duplexes, that would be actually 100 units. So then that's 260 people on one half of that property, and then the other half would be, they were asking for R3, I believe,
RM1.
or RM3.
Okay.
So that RM3 would then factor in the other, how many units of RM3? What was RM3? 139.
139, subject to all units being 1,100 square feet.
So that number would actually be 139 plus the
Oh,
The two-
actually, with our recommendation,
Yeah.
it's RM1.
RM1, yeah.
Yeah,
So
but not-
RM1
not
is,
that part.
what is RM1? 56 units. 50. Okay.
Okay, other questions from council?
One other thing. Has the developer made any plans to put any green areas or parks? This is a question I originally had in December about this, with that kind of density in there. Is there any plans to put aside any of the development for a small park themselves or that?
The original proposal, which is this one here, placed a playground in this corner. Possible community park location. If you see my cursor up here, it's right at the upper tip. So that was sort of a tot lot playground.
And that was city land that they were going to donate money to put the equipment on, and the city would still end up having the maintenance factor for it and any liability for that park?
Generally, in those kind of circumstances, those are the average arrangements where a developer will install playgrounds on either city land or their own land, and from that point on, it becomes city responsibility. Unless within the context of a strata, they decide to have a playground of their own, which would be essentially dedicated to, for example, Cedar townhouses have a playground that belongs to the site.
And what has happened with the idea of the buffer zone behind there, that's those trees above the apartment blocks in that picture, that is actually a road allowance? Has there been any discussion around that being purchased or anything like that?
That discussion took place at the council here. Unfortunately, I wasn't at that meeting, so I couldn't tell you. But within this permutation, we didn't talk about any further than city retaining this road right of way.
Councillor Nish?
So the original proposal was brought forward as RM1 and RM3, all of it, and then it was brought back where they agreed to do RM1 and RM3, and so to move this forward, if we were not in favor of that and wanted to do something different than that, then can we proceed further with that, or does it have to come, again? Like, because what city staff has recommended versus, what the council has kind of talked about is different than what is proposed right now. So I'm asking you, there was no change brought to us, in a council meeting saying that this is what they've proposed. So if we propose something else, then are we able to bring that forward tonight and move forward with this?
So basically, how the meeting with the applicant went is that the applicant was not keen on what council has asked for, and essentially didn't work in their pro forma. We came to the point in our conversation where, suggestion was, we can basically say then, unless you can fulfill this obligation, then there's no reason for us to go back to the council. Both parties are of interest to have something done here. So my offer to the applicant was, take this with you, think about it, and see if you can offer something that's less, because obviously council told you that RM3 is not acceptable. So now, if we are going to continue on negotiations, I would suggest that probably it's the best to to reject the bylaw and start anew with a new set of conversations, if they're prepared to go any further towards the council requests, or is the council prepared to go any further towards what they have offered most recently?
Other thoughts from councillors?
Well, I've been concerned about having a ghetto, and I want to point out that that Oasis Apartments, I think, is 88 apartments on that lot, and all it is apartments and driveways and parking lots, and I'm concerned that we have a bunch of Oasis apartments in a row, creating a virtual ghetto in an area that's going to be high density, much higher density than we have anywhere else in the city, except for the Oasis apartments. But this area is much larger than the Oasis apartment area, and so we would see a number of Oasis apartments together. I agree with densification, but I don't agree with having a Chicago. And so I have stated my position, which is that that if we have some single-family dwellings mixed with smaller apartments, that would create a high enough density. It would create a neighborhood that is a mixed neighborhood. That's with some parks, so that you can have some children who can grow up playing hockey. Street hockey or park hockey or whatever you want, but some kind of a nice development. And I think that I just am not. I would like to see Prince Rupert grow, but to grow in a fashion where 10 years from now that we end up with apartment blocks and with neighborhoods that are going to be somewhere that is desirable to live, and not just something that we put up a bunch of apartment blocks for LNG people who are going to come and go. So I am not, and I have not been in favor of going to just straight apartment blocks. I asked the proponent, and they said that they weren't interested in developing part of it, so we can, see what it would look like, see what the impacts were, and they wanted to have the right to develop the whole thing. So I was thinking that we could just zone it, half of it, and then zone the other half, but that wasn't. They weren't interested in that either. So I am. I am of the opinion that that we should the resolution that's before us is RM3, which I am totally opposed to, and I think that if we want to amend that to something else, it seems to me that we need to have another discussion with the developers, because they want what they want now is RM1 and RM3, and again they still want the RM3 in there, and we have we don't know what the mix is going to be. So I really think that we should defeat this motion, and if the proponent wants to come back and put it in another, I think that would be cleanest. The proponent wants to come back and put in another development, that we can have a discussion then and see if we can come up with something we can all support. I think this is an area where we should have some development and some densified development, but not. We don't need to have this kind of dense development that's going to be LNG. Is going to be dependent on how much LNG traffic we have, and which will probably leave us with a bunch of. We'll overbuild. Could very well live it with a bunch of empty buildings. And such as we already have empty apartment buildings that people haven't been fixing up. We can look at Digby Towers, we can look at the end of 10th, we can look at many apartment buildings that haven't been kept up. And I just don't think we need to set ourselves up for that kind of story in 10 years.
Other thoughts from councillors? Councillor Niche.
it's not that I don't disagree with RM3 to a certain extent. I mean, RM3 is, if this was all RM3, then I definitely don't think that that's the right proposal for the area. I just think there's too much apartments. You know, are we able to continue this tabled to continue a discussion with them? Maybe there is compromise as far as having a bit of everything. Now, I don't think 8 apartments need to be there, but maybe there is room for 1 apartment block. Maybe there is room for 1 apartment block with some townhouses, with some housing, and kind of get what we want, but also allow them to get a little bit of what they want. I definitely don't think that there should be 8 apartment blocks there. I think that's way too many people for the area and not fitting with the rest of the neighborhood. But every neighborhood has an apartment building or something, so why can't we have 1 apartment building, maybe some townhouses, maybe some housing, and then it fits in more with the development. So I'm asking, are we able to table this still and keep it tabled in order to have more of a discussion with them and try and hit it home so that they understand what we want, and not, try not to delay this much further. I would like to see something happen here, but I also want to protect the neighbors in the neighborhood, and I think that there's nothing wrong with an apartment building, but there may be something wrong with multiple apartment buildings. But maybe 1 apartment building, a couple townhouses, I think that's the way we can go. So are we able to table this further and have a discussion with them?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
A developer is sitting in the audience. He's listening to this thing, and it's obvious that neither first or second proposal is something that the council is entertaining to the point of agreeing on it. I would suggest that, we are still at the first reading of the original bylaw. We didn't pass the second reading, and I think defeating that bylaw will give us a clean slate, and we can start a clean slate tomorrow. The applicant is listening to what the council is asking for. It's clear that this kind of a mix is not what council is asking. Council is asking for mixture of R1, R2, RM1, and perhaps a little bit of higher density. And having the bylaw that exists being amended will just create more issues, and it's a question of one council meeting that will be in between the process.
Councillor Cunningham.
The way I see it right now, because we don't have a new amended resolution before us, we have to defeat the RM3, and then the developers come back to us with something that we can work with. So I suggest, if this is the case, and all we've got is to defeat the RM3, because none of us want all apartment blocks, but they're willing to sit down with us, and they've come up with an RM1 and an RM3. And if we're still against the RM3, we can sit down with the developer and work something out if they're so inclined to do so. But, we're sitting here spinning our wheels, and we've got to defeat the motion that's the RM3. So,
No.
And then I don't know where we go with that.
If I wanted to have it.
No. Yeah, Councillor Moreau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for Mr. Long related to process. There's never any guarantee with any development, if we're going to reject it, that the developer's going to come back. So I want to clarify something in terms of process. From my understanding, rejection of a bylaw similar to this, without the unanimous consent of council, would the applicant have to wait an additional 6 months to reapply?
Our procedure bylaw says that if there's something to be reconsidered, so if exactly the same bylaw came back, then I think you would have to wait 6 months. If there's a change in the bylaw, our procedure bylaw wouldn't be applicable. They'd be able to move forward with another application. The issue is, if they want to put in the same application, they can't put in the same application, nor can council actually reconsider anything that hasn't changed for up to 6 months, and you have to wait 6 months or get unanimous consent. So if someone wants to put a different application in, That's legitimate. I don't believe there's a 6-month waiting period based on our procedure bylaw.
And then Councillor Moreau, and then
I mean, I think it's fairly obvious. We all have our own definitions of appropriate density and amenities. But I mean, I think the project fundamentals in this case, I think we can all agree with. It increases our housing supply. It creates more housing diversity. It increases our tax assessment base. It revitalizes an underutilized property, and it's timely. With a lot of the major economic growth on the horizon, as well as for the school district's budgeting purposes as well. I mean, from my understanding, that land sale is contingent on rezoning of this property. I would much rather see us. Well, I mean, before I say this, the proponent has shown a willingness to modify the original proposal after we tabled second reading, and that was to do with road access, which has been obviously satisfied. Density is the thing we're all seeming to find a little bit of disagreement on, but I would much rather see us try to find a better balance when it comes to density than to outright reject the proposal. I don't want to see us, like Councillor Cunningham is saying, I don't want us to see us continue spinning our wheels. I'd rather try to work collaboratively to find a mutually agreeable solution.
just before Councillor Thorgerson goes, regardless, so they've changed their proposal. We have a recommendation. Regardless, we have to get this RM3 off the table, correct? So no matter what, do we have to start a new application even with their change? Or can it be amended now with what they want, if we were to go that way? Like, do we have to get this RM3 off the table no matter what to get the RM1, RM3, and road back on the table? That's the question.
Yes. So basically, by lifting the table motion resolution of the table, the council will decide if they are going to reject RM3. That's the first step. The second step is, are either of these two options something that the council wishes me to proceed to amend the bylaw, to bring it forward as a amending bylaw to the amendment bylaw at the next meeting?
So not a new application.
No.
Okay.
Or
So we could do both.
so
Technically, we could do the R2, RM1, or the RM1, RM3 at the next one without rejecting all right.
yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't necessarily have to defeat the motion to get some sort of change, because no matter what, even if what they've recommended, which is the RM1, RM3, we need to do that. Correct?
Right. So the options are very much, you have two options to give instruction to the staff. The one that this one here and this one here. Those are the two options. Anything else, then the motion remains on the table, and council is going to ask the staff to continue conversations with the applicant, and we'll come back with something new, more structured, more precise than what it's here. That is, if the applicant accepts that.
Okay, so one of the, I think, reason, like, let's answer the why question. Why are we talking about this? I think mainly is because there are two, and having residential houses back up against other residential houses, with the potential of having more residential houses continue up to Silversides, fits with the neighborhood's identity. That fits as in terms of design is one of the reasons for that. And then having more dense on the bottom, I think fits well as well. I think that's one of the reasons why we've brought this forward that way. Not because we don't want to see development. It's that what makes sense 30 years from now. Is this going to be a neighborhood, or is it going to be, I mean, when I went and walked around McKay Street, and you have kids playing on cars because some of the parks are just like there's no park there, right? I'm concerned, as other people have said here, that if we put so many people there, what does this place look like 30 years from now? We can see on the outskirts of town right now what some of our apartment blocks look like. And we are making decisions now that are going to affect the town 30 years from now. So I want to make it clear, whatever we do here, council has approved every development that's come to our desk so far. And this is something that we're trying to be smart about to ensure that the community's interests are met. So I think at this moment, I personally think we need to just we need to table it, I guess, for the next meeting to come up with one of the two options. Is that the way we would move forward with that?
Yes. So, in other words, if I'm understanding correctly, the council has received applicant's proposal, which is still not within a context of the densities that you desire. You are prepared to move from this position here to some intermediate density between the two, and I will seek that conversation with the developer as early as tomorrow morning, and see if he's prepared to do so. In which case, my question to him is not going to be only about the mix. You will have to reduce the mix. You will have to reduce the density and show the exact mix of the units on the lot before I can bring it to the council at the next meeting or whenever it's ready.
Because regardless, we have to do that to even satisfy what their change has been. Right? So no matter what today, we can't do anything today, even if we wanted to move ahead with what they've proposed as a recommendation.
Right, that would have to
Okay.
be at the next meeting.
So no matter what, we have to move this to the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess it's up to council now to decide whether or not we want to reject that, or there might be a chance for us to get what we want within this next 2 weeks, or to talk with them to figure out if there's an intermediate to move this forward without having to outright reject it. Councillor Nish and then Councillor Cunningham.
Like I said before about the, I don't disagree with an apartment block. I just disagree with a lot of apartment blocks. I definitely think that, if they want to move forward and offer us maybe something that's more fitting and more, more of a neighborhood rather than just a bunch of boxes that a bunch of people live in, and in like you say, 30 years from now, it looks like the Harborside Apartments down by Solly's. I'm not interested in that at all. I think that's a very poor. Obviously, it's poor maintenance on behalf of the owner, but that sort of development doesn't really warrant maintenance. They just rent out apartments to people. Whereas if you have a neighborhood around an apartment, if you have houses around an apartment, if you have townhouses around an apartment, I feel that that apartment will always, it'll probably be more fitting to a neighborhood, and that's what I'd like to see these fellows work towards with us, because I really think that we can make something happen. It just needs to be more fitting and more like a neighborhood. That's what I think we all want to see.
Councillor Cunningham.
I'm a little frustrated. I don't know why we are having a long discussion about procedure. This should have been taken care of before the meeting as far as I'm concerned, so we would be discussing something. Like we're sitting here again, and this has gone on since December. Now we've got to table it a second time. The first time I tabled it, I had some real concerns. I still have some concerns, but they're not as major as they were before. But, if we've got to table it again to get this straightened out, I would bloody well hope the next meeting that it's straightened out. Because I just don't see why we're having a procedure conversation about what we can do and can't do right now. So if so be it, I'll move that it's tabled to the next meeting, but let's get it straightened out so the next meeting we can bring it off the table and do something with it.
Okay, so there's a motion to move it to the next meeting. Is that how it would read there? Okay. Any seconders? Okay, seconded by Councillor Renhowa. Just want to clarify something here. It's our job to make decisions publicly, right? We can't make a decision like that before the council meeting. Our staff have brought us two options. One option that the developer wants to do, and one option that we're looking towards. Now the next step is to see if those two interests align. That's part of the process. We can't move faster than that. The good news is that we've identified and fixed a big problem, which was the municipal roadway. That was probably one of the biggest issues with the original development, along with the density. And I'm happy that the developer has moved in that direction and has satisfied that need. I think now in the next 2 weeks, we got two options on the table. If we can hopefully make it one option, but it takes some time, right? We need to see what those two options are. You can't sort that out without council deciding it beforehand. So that's why we are here discussing what our options are. And right now there's two things on the table, and I'm hoping by the next meeting we can figure out one and satisfy everyone's interest in this process. Other comments?
I'd just like to say that the developer has asked us to amend the developer's asked us to amend the application for a new mix of both RM1 and RM3. And the original application was for RM3, and they've added RM1, RM3, and changed the roadway. I would, I mean, we want to table it, go right ahead. I think it would just be way clearer if RM1 and RM3 or RM3 alone do not meet what we want, we should just defeat it. So that's why, I think, I mean, if we want to just send this back to the developer again, it just seems to me that we could just as easily defeat it. But if nobody else wants to, I don't care. If we can table it, they have asked for something RM1, RM3. I am not in favor of RM1 and RM3. And so I would defeat that. I would defeat RM3 only, and send it back to the table. I think that we need a mix of I think the single family homes or single family homes duplexes, single family homes and with a mix with suites, but also with a mix of townhouses, and townhouses that are developed so that there's a little park in the middle of all of the townhouses, like they are in Vancouver or down in Pitt Meadows, where I went and looked at the new development down there, so that they are actual neighborhoods, or in False Creek, where they are actually neighborhoods. So I'm prepared to look at all of that kind of thing. What I'm not prepared to do is to let anybody think that RM1 and RM3 is for me anyway, is negotiable. RM1 and RM3 only is not negotiable for me. So that's why I was going to make a motion that we just defeat and send it back to the developer. And if the developer wants to sit down and talk with us again, he's going to sit down and talk with us again. Obviously, there's no 6 months waiting period. So if that would be cleaner. But if the developer wants to look at this and not just walk away and come back and talk to us about how we're going to build neighborhood at below Crestview, then I'm willing to do that either way. But I am not in favor of RM1, RM3.
Mr. Crockett, does it make a difference how we proceed here? If we rejected it versus mending, is it the same time frames, basically?
You're asking me a question of procedure that apparently you don't want me to talk about.
No, I'm just curious. I want to try to resolve something with them, but
to make it very clean, it's easier to start from square one. To carry this on, meaning, next meeting we will have to spend probably a goodly amount of time to say where we were and how did we get here,
right. And
to say now that we got here, this is where we are going from here on. My recommendation would be to start from the clean slate. When you start from the clean slate, the procedure does not apply because it's not the same application that was there before, and potentially there's a loss of 2 weeks. If you think that a loss of 2 weeks is essential, then we can continue patching it up.
Right, Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, if we do this clean cut and defeat this and then start from scratch again, we've already had one meeting with the developer. I would suggest that between now and the next meeting, we sit down with him again and get this straightened out so he knows where we're coming from and we know where he's coming from. I thought this had been cleared up, but I guess it hasn't. So I would suggest that if the developer is still interested and wants to do this, we sit down with them and have a discussion so that at the next meeting, we're all on the same page.
Councillor Nish.
If we tabled it tonight, would we be talking about it in 2 weeks?
Same discussion. Are we
Yeah.
going to have the same discussion in 2 weeks? I don't want to avoid that. Because we might as well get something moving if we're just going to come back here and have the same debate.
Oh, I didn't really mean it that way. I meant more like if we cut all ties and stop this whole conversation and started fresh, is it going to be more than 2 weeks? Because I would rather get it done in 2 weeks than make it 4 weeks for another council meeting. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in trying to deal with this right away and keeping the ball rolling. So if tabling it means we're going to talk about it in 2 weeks at the next meeting, then I want to table it. If we start over again, is that going to be 2 weeks still, or is that going to be 4 weeks? Because if it's 4 weeks, I'd rather table it tonight.
So basically, the way the procedure goes with preparing the reports, I have to have the report done by Tuesday at 2 o'clock. So it's going to be up to the developer to come to see me tomorrow morning as early as 8 o'clock, and we can talk about it if he likes to amend it. And if he likes to amend it, he's going to have 4 days to give me drawings and specifically answering to the questions that you have asked me for, so I can have the report done on Saturday and Sunday to be ready for Tuesday. If that window is missed, then it's going to be for the next meeting.
Just 2 quick points. If we defeat it, there's nothing on the table. There's no guarantee it's going to come back. That's the first point. Second, I think the implications, both for the city and for the school district, if something is taken completely off the table, I mean, there's at least there's something for us to work with here. If it doesn't work and we comes back to next meeting, we're having the same debate, I think it's, if I'm reading the room right, there's a decision that people will make. But frankly, we've got something on the table to work with, and I'd much rather see us work within that while it's on the table.
So we have a motion on the floor at the moment. And if there's any further discussion here, I think we should just call a question. Pardon?
That was what Barry had said.
Yeah. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor to table this to the next meeting. Any further discussion?
Further discussion would be, are we going to be meeting with the developer so we're all on the same page at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think that would be wise.
Would that be prior to the next meeting or at the next council meeting?
Prior to.
Prior to.
I'd love tomorrow. Keep going.
Okay, so we'll just arrange a meeting. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, moving on to reports, questions, and queries from members of council. We'll start with the Housing Committee. So, right now there's a draft report coming out. I believe this week is the draft report. Thank you, Mr. Cricket. A draft report coming out this week to essentially... I'll just wait till the room clears out here. So there's a draft report coming out this week from the committee, the housing group that has been working on this for a while. The draft report will come out this week or next. That will basically outline what all the services will be or needed in this community around housing. So in terms of what those recommendations will be back to the province. So that's one thing that'll be coming out. That will then inform what the level of needs are around housing. Adjacent to that now, the next step will be to get BC Housing in the room, figure out where a lot will be, and really come to consensus about what development, a housing development we would like to do in the community. So what I will do then is sometime in the next 2 weeks here is organize a meeting with councillors, BC Housing. I'll get on the phone first to organize that, and then we can really come up with a plan to say this is where we want to put this and this is the design we want to do, and start moving forward. So that's hopefully going to happen this month with those two items kind of converging together. So they're two different streams, but they're also very parallel. But now the next step now is to really get us to say this is where we want to put something, and this is the level of service we want to do around this type of housing and get going on it. And that's what I have for a report at the moment for that. And after that, members of council. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two really quick items. The first, I just wanted to report back on, while you were out of town, I attended the Chamber of Commerce Small Business Awards and just extended our gratefulness for everything that small business does in the community. And I just wanted to publicly congratulate all of the, not just the winners of the awards, but also the nominees as well. And the second item of note was the Chamber of Commerce also hosted a responsible development forum this past week. And I just wanted to publicly remind everyone that the SIA process is still open until March 11th. So regardless of your thoughts on LNG, if you feel passionately, if you feel strongly, please submit your opinions to the Environmental Assessment Agency before the end of this week and have your thoughts heard.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Along the lines of Councillor Moreau, he had put forth the terms for the business committee, and we were going to have a workshop on those terms, and it seems to be languishing again in the background. So are we going to, Councillor Randawa had suggested a workshop, so I'd like to know if we're going to have this workshop and get this on the road, or is it just going to be something that we're going to put in the back pocket and forget about for a while? And one other thing, I believe, a couple of months ago, we passed a resolution to demolish a house on 9th East. That
I
was,
can't fully recall.
yeah, and the house is still there. I wonder what's going on.
Okay, we'll get that to the engineering. And Mr. Mandrick, can you make a note to let's schedule that workshop for the Small Business Committee? Yeah. Okay, other questions from council? Okay.
Last week, when and I was happy to see that that the report came about the Port Ed, talking about the Port Ed contribution, but I was wanting to make sure that we are going to have, because I asked for this last week, that we are going to have the as close to the actual expenditures per line item for our budget meeting on Monday, next Monday, because what we have is we have a budget that's compared to a budget. Well, you can't compare a budget to a budget. You have to compare a budget to the actuals. So we need as close to the actuals as we can get, and I just want to make sure that they're going to be available for distribution at the next Monday's meeting, because they weren't available for distribution today. And I understand that from last meeting that we were ready. We were going to the auditor with our report, and so that it wouldn't be too far off to take the almost finished actuals and get them out to the budgeting process. And the other thing is I noticed that budgeting process, we're going to have electronic voting. Is that correct for the Monday budget process?
Yeah, like last year.
And so I was wondering if you could explain what that meant. I got a couple of phone calls today about how you electronically vote, and maybe you could explain that so people can hurry up and buy their cell phones.
Well, we also have an option for those non-digital folks. Basically, people who have a smart device can download an app. All the instructions will be given at the budget process, and then when the questions come on the screen in the app, they'll be able to answer the questions live, as well as people at home can use the app while they're watching the TV or use the computer to vote. And those in the audience that are live that don't have a cell phone will have a paper ballot on the questions, and will be able to submit those, and those will be tallied alongside the live votes. So there's multiple options for those who can't. But we used it last year. It was a great tool, and we're hoping more people will come and be engaged this year, and then we'll have some questions for the audience and get a better sense of what how the community wants to see the budget process play out.
And are we going to have that list of questions out ahead of time so that people can attend the meeting with some ideas about what they need to be focused on? And so I was wondering if there's going to be a list of questions published before the meeting, because if you just go to the meeting then have the list of questions after the meeting, then maybe you would have had questions of your own prior to answering those questions.
I think that's something we can easily get done, for sure. We'll do that.
We post them on the website, or
Post them on the website, post them on social media, all that type of thing.
and maybe have some of them downstairs so people can. I've got phone calls from seniors, so they don't want to walk up all the stairs to the upstairs. They're not really computer savvy. They're asking me what they needed to do to electronically vote. I didn't really know, so I said I would ask you tonight.
Right.
And I also said I would ask you for the set of questions. If you could put this set of questions downstairs so they don't have to walk upstairs and they can just pick them up in the city offices on the ground floor, that would be also great. Thank you.
Okay, can do. Councillor Niche.
Just to further to that, I'd like to see the instructions on how to get the app beforehand rather than trying to deal with it right. You're doing that? Okay. It's on the website now? Yeah. Perfect. Taken care of.
Okay, if hearing that there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche.